First contact at the Academy. Ambassador Zexri adjusted his atmospheric stabilizer as he followed Director Chen through the gleaming corridors of Earth's Orbital Defense Academy. His crystalline eyes, adapted for the harsh light of 3 suns, took in every detail of the facility. As the first Meridian diplomatic observer allowed inside a human military installation, he was determined to understand how this young species had advanced so rapidly in space combat tactics. "And this is our primary simulation center," Director Chen announced, gesturing toward a massive circular chamber ahead. "We find that starting training early helps develop the necessary instincts for space warfare." Zexri's sensor filaments detected an unusual energy pattern from the room, not the rigid mathematical precision he expected from a military facility, but something more chaotic, almost musical. As they entered, he froze in surprise. The chamber was filled with children. Dozens of young humans, none appearing more than 14 Earth years old, worked at holographic interfaces arranged in concentric circles. Their faces showed not the stern concentration of military cadets, but expressions of pure joy. Laughter and excited shouts filled the air as their hands danced across the controls. "This is a training facility?" Zexri asked carefully, his translator struggling to convey his confusion. "In a manner of speaking," Chen smiled. "We find that children approach space combat with fewer preconceptions. They see possibilities where adults see only established doctrine." Zexri's attention was drawn to a small group at the center of the room. 3 young humans, 2 females, and a male, were working in perfect synchronization at a shared interface. Their holographic display showed a complex space battle unfolding, with multiple fleet formations executing maneuvers that made the ambassador's inner membranes contract in shock. "That's impossible," he whispered, his sensory filaments extending involuntarily. "The gravitational shear forces alone should tear those ships apart." "Ah, you're watching Team Phoenix," Chen said proudly. "Maya, Raj, and Sarah have developed quite a reputation for innovative tactics. Maya, would you mind explaining your approach to the ambassador?" The taller female, Maya, looked up from her controls, her dark eyes bright with excitement. "Oh, we're using dance principles to coordinate the fleet movements. Sarah's a ballet dancer, so she came up with the idea of treating the ships like dancers in a performance. The gravitational forces actually help if you time the movements right, like using momentum in a pirouette." Zexri's translator struggled with the unfamiliar terms, but he understood enough to be deeply disturbed. These children were casually violating fundamental principles of space combat that his civilization had treated as immutable laws for centuries. "Watch this," Raj called out, his fingers flying across the interface. The holographic ships began moving in a complex spiral pattern, weaving between enemy vessels while maintaining a perfectly synchronized defensive screen. "We based this on how schools of fish move together to confuse predators." "Cool, right?" "Cool," Zexri repeated automatically, though his temperature regulators were functioning normally. He watched in growing amazement as the children's unorthodox tactics completely dismantled the opposing fleet's traditional formation. "The simulation's eye adapts to new strategies," Chen explained. "But these kids keep coming up with approaches it can't predict. They don't just think outside the box, they don't even see the box." As if to prove his point, Sarah initiated a maneuver that had Zexri's sensory filaments coiling in disbelief. She split her squadron into smaller groups that moved in patterns reminiscent of falling snowflakes, each creating its own localized gravity well. The combined effect created a cascade of spatial distortions that scattered the enemy ships like leaves in a storm. "That's new," Chen noted with interest. "Sarah, what inspired that one?" "I was watching snowflakes last week," she replied, still focused on her controls. "They all fall in different patterns, but somehow work together to make something beautiful. I thought maybe ships could do the same thing with gravity." Zexri's diplomatic training helped him maintain his composed exterior, but internally, his minds were racing. In a single afternoon, He had watched children casually discover tactical applications of gravitational physics that meridian theorists had never conceived. More disturbing still was their approach. They treated deadly serious matters of space combat as an art form, a dance, a game to be played with joy and creativity. The implications were staggering. His civilization approached space combat as a pure science, with established doctrines and mathematical precision. But these humans, these children, saw it as a form of creative expression. They weren't bound by preconceptions about what was possible or proper. They simply imagined new possibilities and found ways to make them work. "Would you like to try?" Maya's voice interrupted his thoughts. She gestured to an empty control station. "We could show you some of our basic formations." Thank you, but I should continue my tour." Zexri declined politely, his sensory filaments still quivering from what he had witnessed. As they left the simulation chamber, he could hear the children excitedly discussing new tactical ideas, inspired by everything from sports to music to weather patterns. "I hope this has been informative," Director Chen said as they walked. "Though I suspect not in the way your superiors expected." Indeed, Zexri was already composing his report in his mind, though he knew his superiors would struggle to believe it. How could he explain that Earth's greatest military advantage wasn't their technology or their numbers, but their children's ability to turn the rigid science of space warfare into a joyful creative art? The sound of laughter echoed from the simulation chamber behind them. To human ears, it was simply the sound of children at play. But to Zexri's trained senses, it was something far more significant. The sound of humanity's next generation casually rewriting the laws of space combat, one game at a time. "Director," he said carefully, "I believe I will need to extend my observation period. There is much more to learn here than I anticipated." Chen smiled. "Of course, Ambassador. The children are always happy to have new players join their game." Game, Zexri thought. That's what makes them so dangerous. They don't even know they're revolutionizing warfare. They're just playing. As they continued their tour, the ambassador's sensory filaments detected new groups of children entering the simulation chamber, eager to begin another session of what they saw as simply an entertaining way to spend their afternoon. Zexri wondered if they had any idea they were changing the future of space combat forever. He suspected they didn't, and that perhaps was humanity's greatest strength of all. The challenge begins. 2 weeks into his extended observation period, Ambassador Zexri noticed a shift in the simulation chamber's usual patterns. The casual atmosphere had gained an edge of excitement as students gathered around the main display screen, their voices hushed with anticipation. "The Interplanetary Youth Space Combat Championship," Maya read aloud from the glowing announcement. "Teams from every major academy competing in real time." Her dark eyes sparkled with enthusiasm as she turned to her teammates. "This is our chance to test our theories against different styles." Zexri's sensory filaments detected subtle changes in the room's security protocols. Additional monitoring systems had been discreetly activated, and he noted several new maintenance technicians whose movements betrayed military training. Something more than a simple student competition was unfolding. "The championship scenarios will be unlike anything you've encountered before," announced Combat Instructor Reeves, a stern woman whose presence in the simulation chamber had become more frequent lately. "They'll test not just your tactical skills, but your ability to adapt to completely unexpected situations." Raj raised his hand. "Will we be able to use our own custom formations? Some of them aren't in the standard tactical database." "That's exactly what we're counting on," Reeves replied with a slight smile that made Zexri's diplomatic instincts tingle. "The championship is about pushing boundaries, finding new solutions to old problems." As the students broke into groups to begin their preparations, Zexri noticed Sarah sitting alone at a simulation console, her movements different from her usual fluid grace. He approached carefully, his atmospheric stabilizer humming as it adjusted to her proximity. "You seem troubled," he observed, his translator modulating to what humans called a gentle tone. Sarah looked up, her young face creased with worry. What if our ideas don't work against other teams? Maybe we've been doing everything wrong, making up our own rules instead of following proper military doctrine. Zexri felt his secondary heart flutter at the irony. In my experience, he said carefully, the most significant breakthroughs often come from those who question established rules. Your unconventional approach has produced remarkable results. But that's just it, Sarah insisted, gesturing at her display where ships moved in patterns inspired by her ballet training. We're treating space combat like an art form. The other teams will probably use real military strategies. Perhaps, Zexri replied, choosing his words carefully. That is precisely why you might succeed. After all, art can reveal truths that pure science often misses. Their conversation was interrupted by Maya and Raj rushing over, their faces flushed with excitement. Sarah, we just had an amazing idea, Maya exclaimed. Remember that combination spin move we developed based on your Swan Lake choreography? The one that created those weird gravitational eddies. Sarah nodded, her earlier doubt beginning to fade. Well, what if we combined it with Raj's fish school defense pattern? The gravitational forces could actually amplify the confusion effect. Zexri watched in fascination as the three children quickly lost themselves in tactical discussions that seamlessly blended physics, art, and nature. Their enthusiasm was infectious, drawing other students to join their conversation and contribute their own ideas. The ambassador's attention was drawn to a quiet exchange between Instructor Reeves and one of the disguised military observers. Their approach is completely unprecedented, the observer was saying. The standard combat simulators can barely keep up with their innovations. That's exactly why we need them, Reeves replied in a whisper that Zexri's enhanced hearing caught clearly. The threats we're facing. Conventional tactics won't be enough. Threats? Zexri's diplomatic training kicked in, analyzing the implications. Was Earth facing some imminent danger that necessitated this unprecedented approach to combat training? His thoughts were interrupted by an excited shout from Raj. The team had begun testing their new combined maneuver, and the results exceeded even their expectations. The holographic display showed their ships moving in an intricate dance that somehow merged the precision of ballet with the organic flow of a fish school, creating a defense screen that was both beautiful and devastatingly effective. It's like they're telling a story, another student observed, watching the display in awe. But with starships instead of words. That's it. Maya's eyes lit up. What if we approached each battle like a story we're telling? Not just executing maneuvers, but creating something meaningful. Zexri felt his sensory filaments curl in shock as he grasped the implications. These children weren't just developing new tactics, they were fundamentally reimagining the nature of space combat itself. They saw battles not as mathematical exercises in force application, but as opportunities for creative expression. The championship announcement had catalyzed something extraordinary. All around the simulation chamber, teams of students were beginning to merge their diverse interests and insights into entirely new approaches to space combat. A group of musicians were developing formations based on harmonic resonance. Young athletes were applying principles of team sports to fleet coordination. Even a handful of amateur painters were exploring how artistic composition could inform tactical positioning. As Zexri composed his daily report to his superiors, he struggled to convey the magnitude of what he was witnessing. How could he explain that Earth's children were transforming space combat into a form of collaborative art? That their greatest strength lay not in their technology or training, but in their ability to see beauty and possibility where others saw only cold equations of war. The championship preparations continued around him, but Zexri's trained diplomatic senses detected currents of urgency beneath the surface excitement. Earth's military leadership was using this competition for something more than discovering new tactics. They were preparing for something that would require thinking so far outside conventional boundaries that only the unfettered creativity of children could provide the answer. As Team Phoenix returned to their practice, Their ships dancing through space in patterns that defied traditional physics, Zexri made a decision. He needed to stay and observe this championship. Something unprecedented was about to unfold, and he suspected it would change not just Earth's approach to space combat, but the galaxy's understanding of human potential forever. Patterns in chaos. The first day of the championship preliminaries transformed the simulation chamber into a hub of frenetic activity. Massive holographic displays showed concurrent matches from academies across Earth, while teams of technicians monitored streams of data flowing from each simulation pod. Ambassador Zexri noticed that the number of disguised military observers had tripled overnight. These scenarios feel different, Maya commented during Team Phoenix's first break, her brow furrowed in concentration. More complex, more real. Zexri's sensory filaments detected the subtle tension in Instructor Reeves's posture as she overheard the observation. The scenarios weren't just simulations anymore. They were based on actual tactical data. The children were unknowingly solving real-world military challenges. Look at Mumbai team's formation. Raj called out, pointing to one of the displays. They're using music theory, treating their ships like notes in a symphony. A holographic display showed a fleet moving in patterns that seemed chaotic at first glance, but revealed an underlying harmonic structure. Enemy ships attempting to predict their movements found themselves caught in the rhythm, their responses becoming increasingly disordered. And Singapore's team is applying principles from competitive swimming. Sarah added, studying another screen. See how they're using the vacuum of space like water resistance. Zexri watched in fascination as teams from across Earth demonstrated approaches to space combat that no military strategist had ever conceived. Each group brought their unique cultural perspectives and personal interests to bear, creating a stunning diversity of tactical innovations. A commotion near the main entrance drew his attention. A group of officials had arrived, their attempts at casual dress failing to conceal their military bearing. Among them, Zexri recognized Admiral Chen, Earth's head of space combat development. The Admiral's presence at what was supposedly a youth competition confirmed the ambassador's growing suspicions about its true purpose. Final preliminary round beginning in 5 minutes, announced the automated system. All teams prepare for synchronized engagement. Team Phoenix took their positions at their pod, their earlier nervousness replaced with focused excitement. Zexri noticed subtle changes in their simulation interface. New sensor displays, more detailed physics modeling, enhanced tactical overlays. The system was being upgraded in real time, becoming more sophisticated with each round. Remember, Maya said to her teammates, we're not just fighting battles, we're telling stories. Let's make this one beautiful. The scenario materialized in their holographic display, a complex spatial anomaly field filled with gravitational eddies and radiation storms. Multiple hostile fleets approached from different vectors, their formations unlike anything seen in previous rounds. Wait, Raj said suddenly, his fingers hovering over the controls. These enemy ships, they're not moving like AI. They're more organic. Zexri's primary heart nearly stopped. The boy had inadvertently identified something crucial. The enemy ships in this scenario were being controlled by actual alien battle computers. Earth's military was using the championship to test children's tactics against real threats. But before he could process the implications, Team Phoenix began their response. Sarah initiated a series of movements based on a ballet piece called the Firebird, her ships weaving through the spatial anomalies as if they were dancing through flames. Maya coordinated their defensive screen using principles from classical Indian dance, creating patterns that seemed to flow like water despite the chaos of space. Raj, meanwhile, had integrated his understanding of marine biology with the team's artistic approach. Their ships moved like schools of deep-sea creatures, using the gravitational eddies the way ocean life used currents. The combined effect was mesmerizing, a perfect fusion of art and tactics that turned the battlefield into a cosmic stage. The military observers leaned forward as their sensors registered something unprecedented. The gravitational fluctuations from Team Phoenix's maneuvers were creating interference patterns that disrupted enemy targeting systems. Their artistic approach had accidentally discovered a new form of electronic warfare. Multiple teams reporting similar phenomena, one of the technicians announced. The creative variations in ship movements are generating complex electromagnetic signatures that our standard analysis can't predict. Admiral Chen nodded slowly, a slight smile playing across his face. "They're not just thinking outside the box," he murmured. "They're dissolving the box entirely." Across the chamber, other teams were achieving similarly unexpected results. A group from Brazil had based their tactics on capoeira, turning their ship's movements into a deadly zero-gravity dance. A Russian team applied chess strategy with figure skating principles, creating elaborate tactical patterns that left their opponents in disarray. Zexary observed it all with a growing sense of awe and concern. His civilization had spent millennia developing space combat doctrine based on mathematical precision and tactical orthodoxy. But these human children, unburdened by such constraints, were effortlessly transcending those limitations by simply refusing to acknowledge them. Energy spike detected in Sector 7, the automated system announced. Anomaly pattern shifting. On the main display, a new phenomenon appeared. A swirling vortex of spatial distortions that threatened to tear apart any ships caught in its influence. But instead of retreating, Team Phoenix saw opportunity. "It's just like the chaos section in Swan Lake," Sarah exclaimed. "When everything seems to be falling apart, that's when the most beautiful patterns emerge." Their ships began moving in a complex spiral formation, using the very forces that threatened to destroy them to power their maneuvers. Other teams quickly adapted the strategy, adding their own cultural and artistic interpretations. The simulation chamber's sensors struggled to track the multitude of innovative approaches being developed simultaneously. Admiral Chen turned to his staff. "Send this data to Fleet Command immediately. Priority Ultra." Zexary's diplomatic training helped him maintain his composure, but internally his minds were racing. Earth wasn't just preparing these children for some future conflict. They were actively using their unprecedented creativity to solve immediate tactical challenges that conventional military thinking couldn't handle. As the preliminary round concluded, Team Phoenix gathered around their display, excitedly discussing refinements to their approach. They remained blissfully unaware that their artistic interpretation of space combat had just revolutionized galactic military doctrine. "Tomorrow's the start of the main championship," Maya announced, her eyes bright with anticipation. "I can't wait to see what new challenges they give us." Zexary felt his sensory filaments curl with foreboding. He strongly suspected that tomorrow's challenges would be far more real and far more crucial to Earth's future than any of these brilliant, creative children could imagine. The tournament finals. The championship's final day brought an atmosphere of tense anticipation to the simulation chamber. Ambassador Zexary noticed that the usual technicians had been replaced entirely by military personnel, their attempts at casual disguise abandoned in favor of efficient precision. Admiral Chen stood before the assembled teams, his expression grave. "Today's scenarios will be unlike anything you've encountered before. They'll test not just your tactical creativity, but your ability to adapt to completely unexpected situations." Maya exchanged glances with her teammates. "Something's different," she whispered. "Even the air feels charged." She wasn't wrong. Zexary's sensory filaments detected multiple high-security communications channels activating throughout the facility. Military ships had taken up positions in orbit above every academy participating in the championship. This was no longer just a competition. The main simulation activated, and gasps echoed through the chamber. The tactical display showed not the usual abstract battle scenario, but a precise replica of Earth's solar system. Enemy ships emerged from multiple vectors, their formations hauntingly familiar to Zexary. They matched exactly the pattern of a Drachnid war fleet his intelligence services had detected gathering at the edge of known space. "This is so realistic," Raj commented, his fingers already dancing across the controls. The enemy ships actually feel like they're thinking. Because they are, Zexri thought grimly. Earth's military wasn't just testing these children anymore. They were using their unprecedented creativity to counter an actual imminent threat. Team Phoenix didn't hesitate. Sarah began a complex series of maneuvers inspired by the rite of spring, her ships moving in primitive, powerful patterns that seemed to channel the very chaos of space itself. Maya integrated elements of traditional Indian martial arts, turning defensive formations into devastating counterattacks. "Look at how the gravitational fields are interacting," Raj called out excitedly. "If we time this right." His ship shifted into a pattern based on coral reef ecosystems, creating eddies in space that disrupted enemy targeting systems. Across the chamber, other teams were bringing their own unique perspectives to bear. A team from Kenya based their tactics on traditional tribal dances, their ships moving in rhythmic patterns that seemed to hypnotize their opponents. Australian students applied their understanding of bushfire behavior, using solar winds the way wildfires used air currents. Admiral Chen watched the tactical displays intently, speaking quietly into a secure communicator. Multiple novel approaches detected, processing tactical data for immediate fleet implementation. Zexri realized with growing amazement that Earth's military wasn't just observing these children. They were actively incorporating their innovations into real-time defense strategies. The young humans' creative approaches were being translated into actual combat doctrine even as they developed them. Suddenly, the simulation shifted. New enemy ships appeared, their patterns even more aggressive. Zexri recognized them immediately. They matched intelligence reports of Drachnid shock troops, the vanguard of an invasion force. "These ships are different," Maya noted, her eyes narrowing. "More desperate, like they're fighting for survival." Sarah nodded, her hands moving instinctively. "Then let's show them a dance of life, not destruction." Team Phoenix's ships began moving in patterns inspired by growth and renewal. The unfurling of flowers, the spread of tree branches, the spiral of galaxies. Other teams caught on, each adding their own cultural interpretations of creation and harmony to their tactics. The effect was stunning. The enemy ships, programmed with millennia of aggressive combat doctrine, couldn't adapt to tactics based on principles of life and growth. Their formations broke apart, their targeting systems confused by movements they had no context to understand. "Multiple enemy formations destabilizing," announced the simulation system. Novel tactical patterns proving highly effective. Admiral Chen turned to his staff, his voice tight with controlled excitement. "Send word to the fleet. Implementation of Protocol Aurora begins immediately." Zexri's diplomatic training couldn't quite suppress his shock. Protocol Aurora, Earth's classified defense strategy against the Drachnid threat, was being rewritten in real time based on children's games and artistic expression. The final scenario unfolded with breathtaking intensity. The combined human teams, each drawing on their unique cultural heritage and personal passions, created a tactical symphony that transformed space itself into their instrument. Ships moved like dancers, like schools of fish, like leaves in the wind, organic, unpredictable, beautiful, and devastating in their effectiveness. Final simulation complete, the system announced. All objectives achieved. New tactical databases compiled and transmitted. The children erupted in cheers, celebrating what they thought was just a victory in a championship. They had no idea they had just helped save their species from an imminent invasion. Maya hugged her teammates, their faces glowing with joy. "We did it. We actually did it." "Yes," Zexri thought, "you did far more than you know. You showed the galaxy that the greatest power isn't in weapons or technology, but in the unlimited creativity of the human spirit." As the celebration continued, Admiral Chen approached the ambassador. "I trust your report to your superiors will be interesting." Zexri's sensory filaments rippled with knowing amusement. "I doubt they would believe the truth, that Earth's greatest defense isn't its military might, but its children's ability to turn war into art." He paused, watching Team Phoenix already discussing new ideas for future games. Though perhaps that's just as well. The Admiral smiled. Sometimes the best way to prepare for darkness is to teach our children to create light. Around them, the young tactical artists of Earth continued their excited discussions, unknowingly having just revolutionized the very nature of space combat. Their victory hadn't just been about winning a game. They had shown the galaxy that humanity's greatest strength was its ability to find beauty and creativity even in the art of war. Understanding humanity. 1 month after the championship, Ambassador Zexry stood in Earth's orbital defense headquarters, watching real-time tactical displays of the Drachnid fleet's retreat from human space. The alien armada, which had expected to face traditional military resistance, had instead encountered something unprecedented: combat tactics that defied not just convention, but imagination itself. The Drachnid commanders are completely baffled, Admiral Chen reported, a hint of pride in his voice. Their battle computers can't predict movements based on ballet choreography or tribal dances. How do you counter an attack pattern inspired by the blooming of cherry blossoms? Zexry's sensory filaments rippled with appreciation. The human military had taken the children's creative approaches and scaled them up to full fleet operations. The result had transformed space combat from a mathematical exercise into an art form that celebrated life rather than dealing death. Team Phoenix is asking when the next championship will be held, Chen continued, pulling up a holographic display of the simulation chamber. They have some new ideas they want to try, based on Maya's study of classical music and Raj's latest marine biology project. The children still had no idea that their game had helped save humanity. Even now, they continued to innovate simply for the joy of creation, unknowingly developing tactics that would revolutionize warfare throughout the galaxy. My superiors are most concerned, Zexry said carefully, about the implications of your training methods. They fear that by teaching children to treat space combat as an art form, you risk creating a society that doesn't understand the true gravity of warfare. Chen's response was interrupted by a transmission from the simulation chamber. Sarah had been working with teams from around the world to develop new tactical patterns based on different cultural dance forms. The resulting formations were both beautiful and devastating, ships moving in harmony with space itself rather than trying to impose order upon it. On the contrary, Chen replied, gesturing to the display, by approaching combat through the lens of art and creation, our children understand something far more fundamental than the mathematics of destruction. They understand that even in conflict, there can be beauty and growth. Zexry watched as Sarah guided her ships through a series of movements inspired by a fusion of ballet and African dance. The pattern created ripples in space-time that could disrupt any conventional attack formation, but it did so by working with the fabric of space rather than against it. The Drachnid expected us to fight fire with fire, Chen continued. Instead, we showed them that water can overcome flame not through superior force, but through flowing around and through it. Our children taught us that. In another part of the display, Maya and Raj were teaching younger students their techniques, explaining how to see the beauty in gravitational interactions and the poetry in orbital mechanics. They weren't creating weapons, but rather a new way of thinking about space itself. I must ask, Zexry said, his diplomatic training warring with his curiosity. Why did you allow me to observe all of this? Surely you knew I would report everything to my government. Chen smiled. Because we hoped you would understand what you were really seeing. This isn't about military advantage. It's about changing how the galaxy thinks about conflict itself. The Admiral gestured to a new display showing simulation chambers being constructed on other worlds. Already, other species are requesting to participate in the next championship. They want to learn not our tactics, but our perspective. Zexry felt his secondary heart flutter as he grasped the full implications. Earth hadn't just developed a new form of space combat. They had created a way to transform the very nature of conflict. By teaching children to see beauty in the dance of ships through space, they were seeding the galaxy with a new understanding of how to interact with the cosmos itself. Your report to your superiors, Chen said softly. What will it say? The ambassador watched as Team Phoenix demonstrated their latest innovation, a tactical pattern based on the growth of crystal formations that reminded him of his own world's sacred geometries. In that moment, he saw the true power of humanity's approach. I will tell them, Zexri replied, his sensory filaments extending in a gesture of profound respect, that humanity's greatest achievement isn't teaching their children the art of war, but showing the galaxy that even in our darkest moments, we can create something beautiful. On the display, Sarah was explaining to a group of alien observers how dance could teach more about spatial dynamics than any military manual. Maya and Raj were working with scientists to understand how their intuitive grasp of complex systems could advance physics theory. The next championship, Chen said, will be open to all species. We believe that when children from across the galaxy come together to create rather than destroy, to dance rather than fight, something remarkable will happen. You'll change the very nature of space combat, Zexri observed. No, Chen corrected gently. We'll change the very nature of how species interact with space itself. And perhaps in teaching our children to see beauty in the stars rather than targets, we'll create a galaxy where combat simulators are used only for play, never for war. As if to emphasize his point, the main display showed Team Phoenix working with their first alien students, teaching them to see space battles as choreography rather than conflict. The children's laughter echoed through the chamber, a sound that represented not the future of warfare, but the possibility of something far more profound, a universe where the dance of ships through space celebrated life rather than dealing death. Zexri made his final diplomatic notes, knowing that his report would be studied by generations of sinologists trying to understand humanity's unique perspective. But he suspected that the truth could only be truly understood by watching children at play, seeing the universe through eyes that found wonder and beauty in every challenge. For in the end, humanity's greatest gift to the galaxy wasn't their tactical innovations or their creative approach to problem-solving. It was their ability to teach the universe that even in the coldness of space, there was room for dance, for art, for joy. And that, perhaps, was the most powerful defense of all.